You're standing at the edge of a crowded room, pulse hammering in your ears, watching her laugh with someone else. Your throat tightens, your palms sweat, and in that moment, you realize something terrifying. You've already lost before you've even opened your mouth. But here's what nobody tells you. That fear crushing your chest right now, it's not weakness. It's not inadequacy. It's a signal, a warning light flashing in the darkness of your nervous system, alerting you to the presence of social stakes, of potential rejection, of the possibility that you might say something stupid and watch her eyes glaze over with disinterest. And 500 years ago, a man sitting in a stone cell, exiled from power, betrayed by those he served, put quill to parchment, and wrote something that would change how we understand human nature forever. Niccolo Machiavelli wasn't thinking about dating when he wrote The Prince. He was thinking about survival, about power, about the brutal mechanics of how human beings operate when stripped of their polite facades. But what he discovered in those dark meditations applies to every interaction you'll ever have, especially the ones that make your heart race and your mind go blank. Because talking to women isn't really about talking to women at all. It's about understanding the invisible architecture of human psychology. The same principles that govern kingdoms govern conversations. The same dynamics that determined who lived and who died in Renaissance Italy determine who captures attention and who fades into the background at every bar, every party, every chance encounter that could change your life. Right now, somewhere in your city, a woman is deciding within 3 seconds whether a man is worth her time. She's not thinking about it consciously. She's not running through a checklist. Her ancient brain is processing thousands of microsignals, reading body language, vocal tonality, energy patterns, and making a snap judgment that feels like instinct but is actually the result of millions of years of evolutionary programming. And the man standing in front of her has no idea that the battle was won or lost before he even spoke. This is what Machiavelli understood that most men never will. The game is psychological warfare, and most soldiers don't even know they're on the battlefield. Let's get one thing brutally clear right now, because if you don't grasp this, nothing else will make sense. When you approach a woman, when you start a conversation, when you try to capture her attention, you are not engaging in friendly social exchange. You are entering a dominance hierarchy. This isn't cynical. This isn't misogynistic. This is observable reality backed by evolutionary psychology, neuroscience, and 500 years of Machiavellian insight into human nature. Every social interaction is a negotiation of status and value. Who leads? Who follows? Who holds the frame? Who breaks first? And the reason you feel fear when you think about talking to attractive women is because your subconscious mind knows what's at stake. It knows that if you approach from a position of need, if you telegraph desperation, if you submit your frame to hers before the interaction even begins, you've already positioned yourself as lower value. Game over. She'll be polite, maybe, but her interest will evaporate like morning fog. Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Now, before you misinterpret this, he's not talking about making women afraid of you. He's talking about respect, about the kind of presence that commands attention rather than begging for it. And this is where most men get everything backwards. They approach women like supplicants approaching a queen, hoping for scraps of approval, desperately trying to prove their worth. They lean in, they laugh too eagerly at her jokes. They agree with everything she says. They pedestalize. And then they wonder why she loses interest faster than you can say friend zone. Here's what Machiavelli knew. People are drawn to power. Not crude, aggressive dominance, but the quiet confidence of someone who knows their value and doesn't need external validation to confirm it. This is the foundation everything else builds on. Before you learn what to say, you must become the kind of man who doesn't need her approval to feel good about himself, because she can smell neediness from across the room, and it repels her on the visceral level she can't even articulate. The first principle of Machiavellian social dynamics is this: he who cares less controls the frame. Think about that for a moment. Really let it sink in. In any interaction, the person who is less emotionally invested, less outcome dependent, less desperate for a particular result, holds the power. This doesn't mean you act like you don't care about anything. That's just nihilistic posturing, and women see through it instantly. What it means is that your emotional state, your sense of self-worth, your mood, your energy, none of it is contingent on her response to you. You're offering her the opportunity to engage with someone interesting. If she takes it, great. If she doesn't, your day continues exactly as planned. No devastation, no spiral of self-doubt, no obsessive rumination. This is abundance mindset in its purest form, and is the most attractive quality a man can possess. Because when you genuinely don't need her validation, when you're truly indifferent to the outcome, something magical happens. She becomes curious. She starts to wonder why you're different from the parade of men who approach her with barely concealed desperation. She begins to qualify herself to you, trying to figure out if she measures up to your standards. The power dynamic has flipped, and you didn't have to say anything clever or use any pickup lines or perform any tricks. You simply occupied a different psychological space than she's used to. Machiavelli observed that men are more ready to repay an injury than a benefit. Translation: people value most what they have to work for. If you make yourself too available, too easy to win over, too eager to please, you destroy your own value in her eyes. Not because women are cruel or manipulative, but because human beings are wired to pursue what retreats and retreat from what pursues. This is basic behavioral psychology, confirmed in study after study. The intermittent reinforcement that comes from someone who is sometimes available and sometimes not, someone whose attention must be earned rather than assumed, creates a dopamine response in the brain more powerful than cocaine. You're not playing games. You're understanding the game that's already been played, whether you acknowledge it or not. Now let's talk about the actual moment of approach, because this is where theory crashes into terrifying reality. You see her. Maybe she's at the coffee shop, absorbed in the book. Maybe she's at a party, talking with friends. Maybe she's just walking down the street, and something about her captured your attention. And immediately, your mind starts its familiar sabotage routine. What if she has a boyfriend? What if she thinks you're creepy? What if you can't think of anything to say? What if she rejects you in front of everyone? This is your fear talking. And here's what Machiavelli would tell you about fear. It is not the obstacle, it is the compass. Every significant thing you will ever do in life exists on the other side of fear. The fear is not a stop sign. It's a sign that you're about to do something that matters, something that could actually change your circumstances rather than keeping you safely trapped in comfortable mediocrity. So you feel the fear, acknowledge it, and then you move anyway. Not despite the fear, but with it. Because here's a secret that will change everything. She's nervous too. Maybe not about you specifically, but about something. About how she looks. About whether people like her. About whether she's interesting enough. Human beings are universally insecure creatures. And the women you find most intimidating are often the ones who feel most isolated, because men have pedestalized them into unapproachability. When you approach her, when you break that invisible barrier, you're doing something most men are too paralyzed to do, and that alone sets you apart. But how you approach matters enormously. Machiavelli wrote that everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are. Your approach must communicate confidence, ease, and outcome independence from the very first second. This means your body language is open, your vocal tonality is grounded, your eye contact is steady without being aggressive, and your energy is relaxed. You're not auditioning for her approval. You're simply a man who noticed something interesting and decided to acknowledge it. The words themselves matter far less than the energy behind them. You could literally say, "Hey, I noticed you from over there and I'd regret it if I didn't come say hello." And if your nonverbals are congruent with confidence, she'll be receptive. You could have the cleverest opening line in the world, and if you deliver it with apologetic, seeking approval energy, she'll feel uncomfortable and want to escape. Once the conversation begins, this is where most men immediately disqualify themselves by falling into what I call the interview trap. They start asking her questions like they're conducting a job interview, hoping that if they gather enough data about her life, somehow attraction will spontaneously generate "Where are you from? What do you do?" Do you come here often? These questions aren't inherently wrong, but when they're delivered in sequence without any personal revelation, without any emotional texture, without any playfulness or edge, they create a boring, predictable dynamic where you're the entertainer and she's the audience being asked to perform. Machiavelli understood that power comes from controlling the narrative. In a conversation, this means you set the frame, you introduce topics, you lead the emotional journey. You make bold statements rather than asking permission through endless questions. Instead of asking where she's from, you make an observation about her energy or her style and see how she responds. Instead of asking what she does for work, you tell a story that reveals something about your worldview and invite her into it. You're creating an experience rather than conducting an interrogation. And here's the crucial part. You must be willing to polarize. Most men try to be agreeable, vanilla, inoffensive, thinking this maximizes their chances. Actually, it minimizes them. When you have strong opinions, when you tease her playfully, when you're willing to disagree with her on something that doesn't matter, you create the emotional friction that generates attraction. You are not trying to make everyone like you. You're trying to deeply resonate with women who are compatible with your authentic personality while naturally filtering out those who aren't. Machiavelli wrote that the lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves. In conversation, this means you must be both playful and powerful. Fox energy is wit, humor, spontaneity, emotional intelligence, the ability to read her responses and calibrate your approach. Lion energy is conviction, groundedness, the willingness to hold your frame even when she tests it, the strength to walk away if she's disrespectful. Most men are all fox, constantly trying to entertain and please. Some men are all lion, rigid and domineering. The man who succeeds with women is both, switching fluidly between modes as the situation requires. Let's address the elephant in the room, the thing that paralyzes more men than anything else: rejection. You're terrified of it. And that terror keeps you locked in the prison of your own making, watching opportunities pass by while you convince yourself that next time will be different, that you'll approach when you are more confident, more successful, more ready. Here's the truth that will set you free. Rejection is not personal. When a woman says she has a boyfriend, or she's not interested, or she needs to get going, in the vast majority of cases, it has nothing to do with you specifically. She might actually have a boyfriend. She might be going through a breakup. She might be having the worst day of her life. She might be attracted to you, but too anxious to engage. There are 1,000 variables you cannot see and cannot control. And making her response about your fundamental worth as a human being is narcissistic delusion. Machiavelli observed that fortune is the arbiter of half the things we do, leaving the other half or so to be controlled by ourselves. You cannot control her response. You can only control your actions. And the more you approach, the more you expose yourself to the possibility of rejection, the more you realize that it doesn't actually hurt. What hurts is the story you tell yourself about the rejection. What hurts is the meaning you assign to it. The rejection itself is just a woman you didn't know 30 seconds ago continuing to be a stranger. Nothing has been lost. But here's what you gain. You gain the experience. You gain the data. You gain the slow erosion of the fear that's been controlling your life. Every approach, successful or not, is a brick in the foundation of your confidence. Every conversation is evidence that you're the kind of man who takes action rather than sitting on the sidelines. And eventually, if you persist, you stop caring about individual outcomes entirely. You become genuinely abundant, not because you're lying to yourself with affirmations, but because you've proven through repeated action that opportunities are everywhere and rejection is meaningless. This is when everything changes. This is when women start sensing something different about you, a groundedness that's magnetic precisely because it's rare. Now we need to talk about something most dating advice completely ignores: sexual tension. Because you can have a perfectly pleasant conversation with a woman, make her laugh, even exchange numbers, and still end up in the friend zone because you never created the polarizing charge of sexual energy. Sexual tension is not crude. It's not overtly sexual comments or inappropriate touching. It's the electricity that exists in the space between what is said and what is implied, between the playful eye contact that lasts a fraction of a second too long and the awareness that both of you feel it. Machiavelli wrote about the importance of appearance versus reality, the gap between how things seem and how they actually are. Sexual tension lives in that gap. It's created through subtle escalation, through breaking the touch barrier in socially acceptable ways. A light touch on her arm when emphasizing a point, through leading her physically, suggesting you both move to a quieter area or grab a drink somewhere else, through the confidence to hold eye contact when she's talking instead of nervously looking away. It's created through your willingness to be slightly unpredictable, to say something unexpected that makes her wonder what you're really thinking. Most men are so terrified of making women uncomfortable that they sterilize all sexuality from their interactions, becoming the safe, boring, asexual nice guy that women love to have as a friend and never think about romantically. The man who creates attraction understands that comfort and tension must coexist. You make her feel safe enough to let her guard down, and then you introduce enough edge to keep her emotionally engaged, wondering where this is going, aware on some level that you see her as a woman, not just as another person. This doesn't mean you're aggressive or pushy. It means you're honest about your intention. You approach her because you found her attractive, not because you want to discuss philosophy or make a new friend. And that clarity of purpose, communicated through your energy and your willingness to escalate appropriately, is what transforms a pleasant chat into the beginning of something more. The final principle I need to burn into your consciousness is this: detachment from outcomes is not the same as lack of ambition. Machiavelli wrote extensively about the importance of virtue, his term for the qualities of decisiveness, boldness, and ability that allow a man to shape his own fortune. You must be willing to take massive action. You must approach women regularly, not occasionally. You must expose yourself to thousands of micro-rejections and hundreds of conversations, because this is the only way to develop the instincts and the reference experiences that transform theory into embodied knowledge. But within each individual interaction, you must be completely detached from the outcome. You're ambitious about your overall development as a man who is successful with women. You're indifferent about whether this particular woman responds positively. This paradox is everything. It's what allows you to be persistent without being desperate, confident without being arrogant, interested without being needy. And it applies everywhere: the coffee shop, the bookstore, the gym, the street, the party, the networking event. Anywhere you see a woman you find attractive is an appropriate place to approach. As long as you're socially calibrated and respect. The men who tell themselves they'll only approach in certain contexts, they're just creating elaborate excuses for inaction. The world is your venue. Every environment is an opportunity. And the more you train yourself to see it this way, to recognize that the woman reading Dostoevsky at the cafe might be hoping someone interesting will break her solitude, that the woman browsing in the bookstore might be thrilled that someone actually approached her in real life instead of swiping on an app, the more you realize that your fear has been lying to you this entire time. So here we are, at the end of this journey through Machiavellian principles applied to the most fundamental human interaction: man meeting woman. And if you've absorbed what I've shared with you, you understand now that talking to women without fear is not about eliminating the fear. It's about developing a relationship with fear where it informs you without controlling you, where it signals importance without triggering paralysis. You understand that attraction is not about being perfect or rich or devastatingly handsome. It's about occupying a psychological space of confidence, outcome independence, and authentic self-expression that most men never access because they're too busy seeking approval. You understand that every interaction is practice, every approach is data, every rejection is meaningless, and every success is evidence that you're becoming the man you're capable of being. Machiavelli spent his life studying power, but what he really understood was human nature, in its rawest form, stripped of comforting delusions. And human nature responds to strength, to confidence, to the man who knows what he wants and pursues it without apology. This isn't manipulation. This is clarity. This is honesty. This is you deciding that you will no longer allow fear to rob you of experiences, connections, and possibilities that could change the entire trajectory of your life. The woman you've been dreaming about, the one who seems impossibly out of reach, she's not going to fall from the sky into your lap. She's not going to approach you and make it easy. She's out there right now, possibly feeling just as lonely and hoping someone interesting will enter her life. But you have to be the one to make it happen. You have to be willing to cross that invisible barrier that separates the men who merely wish from the men who act. And when you do, when you finally internalize these principles and make them part of your operational reality, you'll look back on this moment and barely recognize the person you used to be, the one who was controlled by fear, the one who let opportunities slip away, the one who convinced himself that someday he'd be ready. That person is dying right now, and someone new is being born. Someone who understands power, psychology, and the brutal but beautiful reality that you get exactly what you have the courage to pursue. If this resonated with you, if you felt something shift in how you understand yourself and your potential, then I need you to do something right now. Don't let this be another video you watch and forget. Don't let this be more information that you consume without transformation. Hit that subscribe button because I'm gonna keep giving you the raw, unfiltered truth about male psychology, attraction, and power that nobody else is willing to say. Smash that like button if you're committed to becoming the kind of man who takes action instead of making excuses. Drop a comment below telling me about your biggest fear when it comes to approaching women, because I want to know what's holding you back so I can address it directly in future content. And share this video with every man you know who's trapped in the same prison you're breaking out of right now, because this information is too important to keep to yourself. The algorithm rewards engagement, and the more you engage, the more men I can reach with this message. So take action right now, because the difference between the man you are and the man you are capable of becoming is nothing more than the decision to stop waiting and start doing. I'll see you in the next one, and I cannot wait to hear about the approaches you're gonna make, the fears you're gonna face, and the life you're going to build when you finally embrace the power that's been waiting inside you all along.